All right. Okay, so that's a great point. Also, this presentation will be recorded. So if you all want to access it afterward, it's going to be on our YouTube page. And if you want to share it with friends, coworkers, teens in your life, we absolutely encourage that. And I also wanted to mention that our chat box, because we're in a webinar presentation, it is completely confidential. Sarah will be able to see who asks the questions, but the other attendees will not. So we really encourage you to ask what questions are on your mind if there's teens in your life, or if you are a teen and you're curious about teen dating violence, or if you have a friend who might be experiencing teen dating violence, please ask all the questions that you have. So this year, Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, the theme is Know Your Worth. So this is about learning about healthy relationships and self-empowerment, knowing what your worth is, respect that you are deserving of a healthy and loving relationship. And that the theme is to empower the audience to learn more about healthy relationships and to know what they are worth and what they deserve. It is really important and a personal empowered statement that guides actions, behaviors, and communication in relationships to be healthy and free from violence. I really like this. I feel like this is also really aligned with the mission and model of RESOLVE, not only to eradicate domestic violence and intimate partner violence in our community and in our society, but also to teach individuals about healthier relationships and to create long-term sustainable change. So let's define intimate partner violence just so that we're all on the same page during this presentation today. So intimate partner violence and also teen dating violence, we're going to use those both as an umbrella term to really capture forms of abuse that happens in the context of a relationship. So intimate partner violence is a pattern of purposeful, coercive behaviors that may include inflicted physical injury, psychological abuse, sexual assault, progressive social isolation, stalking, deprivation, intimidation, and threats. These behaviors are perpetuated by someone who is, was, or wishes to be involved in an intimate or dating relationship with an adult or adolescent victim, and are aimed at establishing control over one partner over the other. I think what's really key here is a person who is, was, or wishes to be in a relationship. So thinking too about someone who is interested in another person as a romantic partner, but the relationship never develops in that way. Intimate partner violence can still be present and oftentimes can occur. Okay, so thinking about more specifically IPV and young people. Okay, so 71% of female survivors report experiencing their first instance of IPV prior to the age of 25. 25.8% report their first experience occurred prior to the age of 17. Females between the ages of 16 and 24 are roughly 3 times more likely than the rest of the population to be abused by an intimate partner. So kind of starting to notice themes of socialization and messaging that are really rooted in systems of misogyny and the patriarchy, and just noticing the impact that that has on not only the person experiencing intimate partner violence, but also the person who is causing harm. 56% of male survivors report experiencing their first instance of IPV prior to the age of 25. 14.6% report their first experience occurred prior to the age of 17. The Urban Institute report found that 89% of transgender teens experience physical dating violence, 61% were sexually coerced, 59% experienced emotional abuse, and 56% reported digital abuse and harassment. And we're going to explore more specifically, and we're going to dive into experiences of LGBTQIA+ teens, and we'll also explore technology abuse and harassment. Okay, so exploring and identifying vulnerabilities from exposure to IPV in the home. So thinking about socialization and normalized patterns of behavior. So what and how might have that teen have been socialized, and what actions and behaviors became normalized? So what maybe, how were they socialized to maybe find abusive behaviors or experience abusive behavior as something that is okay? And maybe even exploring some of those early attachment experiences. So thinking about attachments with caregivers. Was that a secure attachment? Was that an insecure attachment? And how does that have impact on how the child and then teen experiences themselves in a relationship, or an intimate relationship rather? Messaging and internalized messages related to sense of self and what it means to be good. So what messages did that child and teen receive? And then how did that become internalized, and how do they begin to understand themselves and what it means to be a good girl or a good person or a helpful person or a kind person? So what do those messages look like, and how might that become or look like a vulnerability? What do relationships look like, and how were those relationships modeled? So was IPV present in the home, and is that how relationships were modeled to the child and teen? Did it normalize those patterns of behavior? Were there power and control dynamics present in those relationships that were modeled to them that might have normalized some of those power and control dynamics? And experiences of primary trauma. So kind of exploring those adverse childhood experiences. So did the child experience primary trauma either by witnessing domestic violence or intimate partner violence, or experiencing other acts of, or other experiences of trauma like neglect, abuse, sexual abuse? Experiences of boundary setting and how boundaries were modeled to them. So what did boundaries look like in their home? Were boundaries kind of fuzzy and muddy? Were boundaries really enmeshed? Were boundaries, did the boundaries that the child and teen attempt to create, were they not respected? Were boundaries modeled to them? So did they see a caregiver asserting and creating boundaries? Would that child and teen be able to identify that their own boundaries had been crossed? So kind of exploring how early boundaries and how boundaries were modeled can be a vulnerability later on in their own intimate partner relationships. And then thinking about coping skills and survival skills to get their needs met. So thinking about something like people pleasing. So if that child and teen learned that people pleasing was a really excellent way to get their needs met, they may then notice or use that skill in their intimate relationship, and that might become an area of vulnerability. That might become a place where their partner really exploits that and uses that for their own gain. Okay, so teen dating violence prevalence and some facts. So nearly 1.5 million high school students nationwide experience physical abuse from a dating partner in a single year. About 72% of 8th and 9th graders are dating. So those are really young people, right? Thinking about 8th and 9th graders, like their brains aren't fully developed quite yet. They're still really learning like who they are, what their boundaries might look like. And they're still really learning like, what do healthy relationships look like? So is this a person who's quite ready or equipped? Do they have the skills to be able to communicate openly, have respect for their partner, assert boundaries, respect another person's boundaries? And then thinking about abusive relationships can have severe short and long-term effects on a developing teen. So it really feels like 8th and 9th grade, this is this really sweet spot for starting to talk to kids about healthy relationships, components of unhealthy or abusive relationships. Only 33% of teens who were in an abusive relationship ever told anyone about the abuse. And 81% of parents believe teen dating violence is not an issue, or they admit they don't know if it's an issue, though 82% of parents feel confident that they would recognize the signs if their child was experiencing dating abuse. A majority of parents, 58%, could not correctly identify all the warning signs of abuse. So Today, we really want to take a dive to look at what are the signs and then also what to do if you're starting to notice those signs. Okay, so this is the Duluth model of teen power and control. So the power and control wheel for teens specifically. So at the center of the wheel, we see power and control. At the outside of the wheel, we see physical and sexual violence as a way to maintain power and control. And inside, we see different slices of the pie that are identifying different tactics used to maintain power and control. And what I like about this one, that the tactics identified are really specific to teens and their emotional and social experiences. We're going to dive a little bit deeper too into what those tactics might look like. So technology abuse and social media. Technology and social media, it is like big important parts of our lives. We use technology every day. Social media is a part of our world, and it's especially true for teens. Social media, especially during COVID and the pandemic, is a critical part to a teen's social life and social experience. But there's a lot of vulnerabilities related to technology and social media. So technology abuse and dating violence, according to the Urban Institute project, 25% of dating teens have experienced abuse by their partners through technology and social media. Some of those tactics look like using technology and social media to track or monitor their partner's whereabouts, constant texting, coercing a partner to send explicit photos, coercing a partner to have sex, demanding partner for passwords and login information, tampering with social media without their partner's knowledge. And with this rise of technology abuse, we do unfortunately see a rise in revenge porn and dating violence. So revenge porn is a tactic used by abusive partner that combines technology abuse and sexual abuse. Revenge porn is when a partner threatens or does actually share sexually explicit videos or pictures without the partner's consent. Revenge porn is often shared with the survivor's friends, family, or is even uploaded to social media or websites. And this is really critical because if these teens, right, are under 18, that's considered and is child pornography. So that has great impact on the survivor, but also the person causing harm. So it's something to really explore how we can create safeguards around this. Revenge porn is a tactic to isolate, humiliate, control, discredit, and coerce an individual or survivor. The Urban Institute project found that a third of survivors who experience technology abuse experience sexual coercion from their partner. So we can really see this intersection of technology abuse and sexual abuse. Okay, so teens who identify as LGBTQIA+ and their experience with domestic violence or intimate partner violence. So according to the Urban Institute project, teens who identify as LGBTQIA+, they experience higher rates of dating violence. And those teens are vulnerable to abuse specifically targeted to their gender identity and sexuality. So we may see tactics or experiences like outing or disclosing a person's sexuality or gender identity without their consent, coercion, isolation, threats, and manipulation surrounding their basic needs like housing, school, family, spirituality, and employment. So thinking about a teen whose housing could be at risk based on their identity, and how might their partner use that and exploit that for their own gain or a way to cause harm. Emotional and psychological abuse targeting their identity specifically. Gaslighting, using challenging or traumatic experiences with their family as a tool for control. So thinking about like if a teen came out to their family and that disclosure didn't go well, and maybe that family cut the teen off, and perhaps the partner says, well, of course your family doesn't want to talk to you. Like, why would they want to? Like using that experience to cause harm and as a way to manipulate them and also isolate them further. Isolation from formal and informal supports related to their identity. So thinking about nonprofits or agencies, teachers, informal and formal supports that might be able to support that teen, and maybe their partner isolates them from those supports. Gender roles and gender stereotypes and roles. Survivors looking for help. They might experience stigma, homophobia, and discrimination. Unfortunately, our society and community may not be at a place where it can really provide the kind of support that teens need, and they may still face and oftentimes do face discrimination when interacting with services and emergency services. And so that can really create a barrier for LGBTQIA teens asking for help or receiving adequate help. Survivors may not feel ready to be open or out with formal and informal support. So kind of gauging too, like where does the survivor feel ready? And they may not quite feel ready to access services either related to IPV or related to their identity. Okay, so thinking about relationships, right? They really fall on a spectrum. So we might fall on one end of the spectrum, we could fall on a different end of the spectrum, or we could fall anywhere in between. So we can think about healthy relationships as like two equal partners, right? Where there's equal open communication, there's respect, they trust each other, there's honesty, equality, they enjoy personal time away from each other, right? So they have separate interests and hobbies. They make mutual choices. So if they decide to do something, they both agree to do that thing. And they make economic or finance, they're equal economically and financially. And so I think for teens, that might look like when they go out to eat or they go to a movie, when they go do something together, you know, maybe they take turns paying, maybe they split the bill, right? But it's not, we'll start to explore what that could look like in unhealthy and abusive dynamics. So in an unhealthy or toxic relationship, you're going to see shifts in power. So there's never really equality, but the power and control dynamic is always shifting. And so we're going to see themes like not communicating, disrespectful or disrespectful dynamics, not trusting each other, dishonesty, trying to take control. So noticing like that shift in power and control, only spending time together, that there is not like separate interests or activities or friendships outside of the relationship. Maybe one partner pressures another into activities, and that it's unequal economically. So maybe one person finds that they're always paying for everything, and that it's not equal. And then we can think about abusive relationships, right? So that's when one person has power and control over another, and there's an imbalance of power. And so some components we'll notice is one partner is communicating in a way that is hurtful and threatening. A partner is mistreating, accusing the other of cheating when it's untrue, denying their actions are abusive. So noticing some of those gaslighting tactics, denying the survivor's reality, controlling behaviors, and isolating their partner from others. So thinking a little bit more deeply about what is a healthy relationship. So healthy relationships are based on respect and equality. They openly communicate. There's mutual displays of empathy and caregiving. So one person isn't called into caregiving for the other, and then that kind of becomes a role of the other. So starting to notice when we were talking about socialization and messaging, thinking about that role that some people may play as people pleasing. So starting to see that vulnerability and seeing how we can see it in a healthy relationship. Respecting each other, mutual trust, honesty, privacy, practicing accountability. So admitting when you're wrong, doing what you say you're going to do, equal standards, right? Like the rules apply to each other similarly. Independence within and outside of the relationship. Partners share responsibilities and they make decisions together. Okay, so warning signs for teens. So maybe you or a friend may or may not be in, or maybe in an abusive relationship. So what are some red flags or early warning signs that you or your friends can look out for? So repeated unwanted attention from partner, name calling, yelling, shouting, or put downs, using humor to degrade, criticize, or humiliate their partner. So sometimes we may notice themes like oh, I was just joking, like you're so sensitive, like it's just a joke, can't you take a joke? So noticing like some of those gaslighting behaviors, or even noticing like humor as a tactic to degrade or humiliate their partner. Having emotional and physical boundaries pushed, apologizing for their partner's behavior or minimizing it when you talk to them about it, identifying that their partner has jealousy issues, constant communication with their partner, feeling pressure to have sex, drink, do drugs, or participate in activities that they may not feel ready for, not consenting to sex, drug, or alcohol use. And then partner using social media without consent and pressuring to have access to phone, email, and social media. So do's and don'ts for teens when supporting a friend. Validate their disclosure and their feelings. Disclosures are really important. And when disclosures don't go well, oftentimes the survivor can internalize that experience and feel shame or guilt about it. And so when they receive an open, non-judgmental disclosure, it really can set the pace for what their experience looks like when healing from or navigating dating violence. Speak up if you notice red flags by talking to a parent, a teacher, or a trusted adult. Speak up if you notice red flags by talking to your friend and listening to their experience. Listen thoughtfully and respectfully, try not to problem solve, and provide support while connecting to resources like a parent, teacher, or a trusted adult. And so what are warning signs for parents? So what are some red flags or early warning signs that parents can look out for in their teen's relationship? Okay, so losing interest in activities they once enjoyed, changing their appearance, no longer spending time with friends or isolation, noticing even if the partner is intentionally isolating the teen from their friends or from their hobbies or family, that if they're kind of like talking negatively about people or things that mean a lot to them, doing poorly in school, increased depression or anxiety, showing up with unexplained bruises, identifying partner as having jealousy issues, constant communication with partner, apologizing for their partner's behavior, minimizing it. Also noticing if the relationship is moving really quickly. So like grand statements like that they're absolutely in love, soulmates, moving in together, talking about marriage, or even wanting to start a family. If we start to notice that the relationship is moving really quickly, that can be a warning sign for parents that something might be up. Expressing their partner has jealousy issues, needing to be constantly in communication with their partner, becoming isolated and distant from you and their friends. So noticing that isolation component again. Increased anxiety, depression and isolation, loss of interest in activities, secret keeping. So I want to also note that some, not all, but some of these might feel consistent with what is age appropriate for teens or what is common for teens. But I think that those can really be early warning signs, and also noticing some of those signs like constant communication, like teens are often on their phone and talking to their friends a lot, but noticing like if the teen doesn't reply to their partner and then there are consequences and a really big fight, that's a really good moment to have a conversation with your kid about, do they feel safe in the relationship? Does it feel like there is equality, open communication? So starting to explore some of those components of healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationships. What if my teen is being abusive to their partner? So holding space for that, there might be parents present who may notice that their teen may be acting or reacting in an abusive way. So to note, violent behavior often begins between the ages of 12 and 18. The severity of intimate partner violence is often greater in cases where the pattern of abuse was established in adolescence. So again, thinking about how early attachments, early experiences in relationships can have short-term and long-term impact on future relationships and future attachments. So if you notice some of these qualities, components, actions, or behaviors in your own teen, some nice places to start would be exploring and developing skills like empathy, accountability, self-reflection, reliability, and responsibility. developing skills like how to notice and respect a partner's personal limits and boundaries, even modeling boundaries with your own teen, exploring and modeling open communication, boundaries, and consent, really starting to talk about what consent looks like too, explore power and control dynamics. And I think a great place to start is the natural power imbalance between a teen and parent, explore messaging and socialization connected to identity, relationships, and roles in relationships. So how does your teen view their identity? How do they view themselves in a relationship? And how do they view what roles in relationships should or shouldn't look like? Start exploring, or you can explore, gender stereotypes and roles. So maybe kind of exploring like the man box versus woman box, and connecting to resources for help and education. Do's and don'ts for parents when supporting teens: validate their feelings and disclosure, provide and offer community resources and referrals, believe survivors, their story and their experiences, listen thoughtfully and respectfully, try not to problem solve, normalize that they're not alone and help is available if they're ready, respect their right to self-determination. And I think this one is really hard because you want to help and you can see that something is wrong, but if they're not ready and we push, they may resist. So kind of falls into that try not to problem solve, and letting them know too that when they're ready, you're available and help is available too. And maybe even providing support while connecting to emergency services like the Child Protective Services, person in crisis, or the police if necessary. Okay, and maybe there's an opportunity to safety plan. So this is another really great way to support teens who might be in a relationship where abuse is present. And a lot of times, intimate partner violence and teen dating violence, it can cause survivors to feel really powerless and disempowered. And so if you're exploring creating a safety plan with a teen or with your teen, it would be really useful, and we really encourage parents to reflect on the natural power imbalance between parents and children, right? A lot of times parents consent for their kids until the children can consent for themselves. And so it's a great opportunity to start talking about power and control dynamics. It's a great opportunity to start talking about those natural power imbalances like those between parent and child. And it would be really useful and a great tool and a way to support that child in starting to feel powerful and empowered again by including them in the decision-making process of creating that safety plan. And so we've outlined some useful safety planning tips, and some of those look like creating step-by-step actions to create physical and emotional safety at home, in school, in social settings. It can look like creating code words with formal and informal support. So maybe your teen is out and their abusive ex-partner or their partner comes and they start to feel really unsafe. They can say to their friends, you know, I could really go for some ice cream right now. Like, what do you guys think? And so their friends would know, ice cream, okay, doesn't feel safe, we gotta go. And that can work for teachers, with parents, with whomever. Identify safe places they can go for help. So can they go to where the parent works? Can they go to the school nurse? Can they go to like can they go to an identified safe room in the school? Also identify safe people that they can go to for help. So is it their favorite math teacher? Is it the school nurse? Is it a friend? And then maybe exploring harm reduction tools when things feel unsafe, like knowing when to leave and how to leave. And if they have to see their partner, can you meet in a public space? And can you bring a friend or a support person? And then when you identify supports, like informal or formal supports, can you also have them create a safety plan if the teen is unable to carry out their safety plan too? And then identifying with supports when they can or should contact emergency services. So allowing that team to identify what their safety plan boundary looks like and to say, if this thing happens, please call the police, or if this thing happens, please call my mom. Okay, so here are resources for teens experiencing dating violence. RESOLVE, we are always a resource. We also can always offer consultation too for parents or teachers or whomever who have a teen in their life who might be experiencing dating violence. And then we also offer individual and group therapy. We offer individual therapy for teens 16 and up with their caregivers' consent and permission. We also offer community education. We offer workshops for mental health and behavioral health workers. And then we also offer the monthly workshop that you all are attending today. And here are identity-specific resources as well. So some resources for LGBTQIA plus teens, and then resources for Indigenous survivors as well. Here are online resources and books that we really recommend, all specific for teens and teen dating violence. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can move into question and answers.
Anyone with any more questions? Hi, Carly. Feel free to send them right in. So one of the first questions we got was, how can parents support teens with building boundaries?
So I think that's such a great question. So starting to talk about like so maybe thinking about like what broadly are boundaries and starting to talk about what would look like their boundaries are, and even using movies and TV shows as an opportunity to take the pressure off and watch maybe conversations or conflict arise in movies and TV and get a sense of like, how would that make you feel if that happened? If you were sitting in your room and somebody walked in without knocking, like that might look like a boundary. Like, how would you feel? And what would you want somebody to do in a situation like that?
I love that, Carly. I think it's always a good idea to go from a point of personal experience of really offering for the teen or child of like, how would you feel about this? And I like the idea of using movies. And also I think for parents supporting teens within building boundaries, it's modeling boundaries, kind of giving a good example of what it looks like to set a boundary and to also accept a boundary from somebody else.
Totally.
Another question we have is, what to do if your teen is experiencing a partner and ex-partner sharing revenge porn?
Oh, what to do if the teen's partner is sharing revenge porn? Mm-hmm. I know this can be really hard, but I would contact the police and authorities right away, because that is child pornography. And so a stop needs to be put to it right away, and pressing charges can be a way to hopefully have the person who caused harm remove the video. The internet is a crazy place sometimes, so that can be really difficult, but I would absolutely recommend contacting the police authorities right away.
Next question. What if my teen is in an unhealthy relationship dynamic? Will it ultimately move on the spectrum into being an abusive relationship over time?
Yeah, so not necessarily, it depends. It may make the person more vulnerable to experiencing abuse in relationships later on in their life if that pattern of behavior and mistreatment becomes normalized or internalized over time. But I think being here today and asking that question offers the opportunity to have a really great conversation with that teen and start exploring what's going on and maybe building skills or tools for future relationships too.
I would agree. And I think even kind of taking a look closer at what's coming up in that relationship that the teen or a person of support is identifying as unhealthy. And is it one thing that could be, fixed with really open communication and new skills and some accountability being taken, or is there like a handful of unhealthy contacts like Carly mentioned, and it's really going to maybe set up that individual for the relationship to go into being abusive or them to engage with an abusive partner later on? Mm-hmm. The next question we have is, can I support my teen with connecting to a hotline for safety planning guidance? And
yes, absolutely. What a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think offering support would be feels really nice if the teen's wanting that assistance. And it's also nice because you're connecting with this objective professional who's also going to be really able to think about the safety planning really thoughtfully.
Yeah.
Another question is, I would guess that issues can come up at school or with peers if a teen breaks up with an abusive partner, but still has to see that person. Can you give some ideas about helping that teen feel safe when there's going to be contact?
Yeah. So I think it would be a great idea could be connecting with the teacher or connecting with some school administrators and letting them know what happened and creating a safety plan. So does that look like the children or the teens are never partners during projects and that they intentionally sit in different parts of the classroom, or maybe even exploring advocating for the teen being either teen starting in a different class or like separating the teens from being in that class together. But I think creating a really strong support team and network and including teachers and administrators and letting them know what happened and creating ways to support them in that way.
I would agree. As a follow-up to that question, someone asked if teens can order as a protection.
Yeah, so parents can get, so for teens under 18, a parent can get an order of protection on the behalf of the child or the teen.
And one other question we have is, as a parent, if I, as a parent, was in a relationship that was abusive, what can I do to help prevent my child from being in an abusive relationship later on in the future?
Yeah, so what a good question. I think talking to the kids, talking to your teen about the abuse in an age-appropriate way. So talking to them what they might have experienced or witnessed and starting to talk to them about what their sense of identity is, what their sense of relationships are, what their sense of responsibility in relationships looks like, and then like what is their sense of their own boundaries and how do they come to understand healthy relationships. And so really starting to have some of those conversations that we outlined in the workshop and starting to just talk about boundaries, expectations, sense of self.
I said, Carly.
Yeah.
Another question we had come in was, how can I tell the difference between a teen who's either snarky or maybe just angsty, going through it, as teens do sometimes, behaviors versus like abusive behavior?
Totally. Yeah, great question. So I think something we see come up is this idea of mistakes and patterns of mistreatment. And I think that everybody makes mistakes, especially when we're teens and teens are struggling with identity and sense of self, depression and anxiety, fitting in, COVID, right? There's so many different stressors right now. And so people make mistakes, but it's about how do people rebound from when they make mistakes? Are they accountable? Do they have self-reflection? Do they have empathy? And do we notice that it starts to become a pattern, and it's a pattern of mistreatment?
I think it's really important how you mentioned the pattern, and also coming back into, we know that those character deficiencies are there for abusive personality types or people who use abusive behavior and tactic. So really focusing in on how do I help my team really develop that so that these aren't long-standing patterns.
Yeah.
Any more questions from anybody coming in? One other question we had in the beginning was just if we were able to share the PowerPoint or any information, and we would love to. We'd love to share that. So anyone who would like to have the PowerPoint, if you want to put in the chat that you're interested, or you can always follow up with us at info@resolve-roc.org. That's going to be our intake and our office manager's email, and she will definitely be able to pass it along to you if you need it today or at a later time. Anyone coming in?
All right, so, well, it was so lovely, even though we're not here in person seeing each other, but I'm so happy that people were here today and coming to learn more. And then just so everyone knows, our next presentation will be in March. It'll be the third Monday of the month from 12 to 1, and our presenter will be Lisa Nolan from Willow, and we will be exploring orders of protection and more information about what that looks like, how to obtain one, just kind of like that 101, orders of protection 101, because sometimes not knowing is really a barrier to obtaining orders of protection. Maybe it would be useful, I'll make a note to explore more like what would it look like for a parent to get an order of protection on behalf of a teenager. So kind of maybe expanding on some of the questions that we had today. But, all right, so if there aren't any more questions, I guess that's it. We're so thankful you all came. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, everyone.